If you've been looking to buy in Ocean City or thinking about it for any length of time, you are probably well aware that if you were to buy now, it is easily the most expensive purchase that you would have ever been able to make in Ocean City for the same type of house. We are at peak prices. We're at near peak mortgage rates for the first time in a very long time. So monthly payments are through the roof. In today's video, I want to take you through a lot of interesting data looking at Ocean City specifically over time to help show you, not convince, not push, but to help you understand that if you were to make a decision now, and let's say hypothetically that we are at the absolute peak and a crash is coming, which isn't the case, what would the future look like for you? What would your appreciation look like? When would you make your money back and be able to exit? So that's what we're going to dive into. So make sure you stick around to the end because we're going to save the best chart for last. Now, before I start talking about this very chart, I want to lay some groundwork. So a lot of buyers that I have worked with, whether they intend to rent or not, are starting to ask themselves, what's the risk, right? If I have a change of plans, if life circumstances differ from what I think they're going to be over the next few years, what does that look like, right? What is my worst case scenario? There are others who are not worried about that in the least. They're still very, very decisive. They're making quick decisions. And they're the ones who now look back 1 month, 6 months, 2 years later, whatever the case is, they made a quick decision. Obviously, things have worked in their favor and they're not looking backwards. So, given all of that, let's start here by looking at the sales volume, and then we're going to dive into the prices. So one thing I want to lay out here again, when we've seen inventory rising over the last few weeks, we're still in the 200s. And for context, again, that's about half of what used to be normal. So this chart here, I think paints the picture pretty darn clearly. So the blue line is the total amount of sales each year in Ocean City, and this is just a year-by-year chart. And we have the total number of listed homes. Some of those, right, may have expired and relisted. Some were taken down and relisted. So there may be some double dipping in here, but the picture remains the same. So during the 2000s through the financial crisis, right, things were pretty much aligned. It was a very, very reasonable market, right? We weren't seeing a ton of inventory necessarily. However, they were selling and they did take time to sell. So that inventory still did stack up, normally again in the 400 to 500 range. Now we hit 2007, the great financial crisis, and things totally changed. Now, obviously, yes, the total number of listed went through the roof. That's primarily due to the fact of how much development took place from that point forward, right? We're now seeing instead of one single family house listing, we're seeing the single family house list, a developer buys it. We're then seeing two, sometimes three, depending on if it's duplex or triplex, going up in its place. So you're potentially getting 2 to 3 transactions out of every one house. So things did spike tremendously. Now, the big thing that I want you to notice going forward from about 2008 through 2020 is the gap between the sales and the listed started to shrink, right? Slowly but surely it started to shrink. And now, after 2020, everything took a nosedive, right? We are seeing way fewer listed homes than we have seen since before 2010. And obviously, sales were almost at our lowest, which was down in the low 600s in 2008. In 2023, we didn't have much more than that. So, the story I want you to take from this and how you can apply this is that everything is changing back to, I'll say, a new normal after 2020, right? All these folks that have 2, 3, 4% mortgages have these conversations weekly with people in that situation where they prefer, right, to move closer to the beach, move to the bay, whatever it is. That extra bedroom isn't really worth it to them anymore. In the past, it was a very easy transition when rates were pretty stable. But now you have a very nuanced situation. And I think we're going to see this total listed number stay very low for the foreseeable future for that very reason. The sales side of things, I know we have continued to take a dive. I fully expect that we're going to flatten out and see that start to build starting this year. I don't expect a huge dump this year, but I do think we'll be above where we were last year. And then going forward, assuming that interest rates and mortgage rates start to come back down, which is still the expectation, whether that's the end of this year, whether that's early next year, time will tell. Those sale numbers are going to start to go back up. But again, I don't think rates are going to come down nearly enough to start to convince a lot of those people who were traditional move up buyers to move up. Now, we're going to get to the fun stuff here. I'm going to zoom in for a second because I want you to just focus on one chart at a time if we can. So we're going to start here with average sale price by year. So again, keeping that chart we just looked at in mind, right? From 2005 onward, where we had the sale numbers pretty low, prices were still pretty low. They stayed, I'm not going to call it flat, they bounced around a little bit, but the average sale price stayed well under a million for that entire period. With our absolute bottom, it looks like coming in 2016. And this is the single family line in blue and the orange here for condos. Obviously, we see a massive spike, right, starting after 2019, and that's in both cases. Single families, way larger margin of increase, way bigger adjustment upwards in sale price. And that's explained mostly by the high end, huge new construction homes. Condos, there's only so much you can do. There's always going to be the 0, 1, 2 bedrooms that are, under $500,000. They're going to keep that mean, that average sale price somewhat contained. Single family, you don't have that, right? As land value goes up, even the teardowns are skyrocketing. And then once you can put a 3, 4, $5 million home on it, things are going to change in a hurry. And that's really what we've seen. If you've been paying attention to these videos, the market updates, been talking now for the better part of the last 6 to 8 months that single family prices are going to trend downwards, mostly because those high end ones aren't selling quite as quickly. Some of the more entry level homes under a million are not selling as quickly because that's the most rate sensitive population. People looking to move here year round in neighborhoods like my old one in Marion Park. A lot of those homes we're seeing sit at, I'm not going to say unreasonable prices if you're looking at the average here, but given the location, the distance from the beach, the flooding that you have to deal with in some of those places, it's not a shock that a lot of those have not sold yet. So with that in mind, I wanted to go next level here, because one of the questions I get a lot is about resiliency and appreciation depending on the type of unit or the type of condo that you're buying. So single family aside, again, that's a pretty straightforward bucket. We broke down the condo sale price by the number of bedrooms. And all the data I have here for all these charts goes back to 2020. It's the best we can do from the MLS. Before that, people were, writing on notepads, and I don't have access to any of that. So what we see here in a video I did a couple years ago, I'm not going to link it down below. I felt that there was room for a lot of improvement in that efficiency, the 0 bedroom condo market. And what we can see here, since I made that video in 2021, things went up substantially, right? We were looking at 134,000 on average, all the way up to now 214,000 on average. That's a massive increase. But there's something that, again, you guys have eyeballs. I want you to notice that there's a big difference in what has happened from 2022 forward, depending on the type of condo that you would be buying. So we have the 3 and the 4 bedrooms, and including the 5, even though 5 flattened out between 2022 and 2023, those are getting more out of reach. Those average sale prices are increasing at a much greater percentage than the 0, 1s, and 2s. Now, the zeros, again, still trending upwards. The other one's tapered off, understandably so, because there's only so much of a market for a 1 or 2 bedroom condo. There's not a lot of space in there. From a sales standpoint, those are very budget constrained buyers. The 3 bedroom is always the traditional entry level. And what I've seen just in the last year and a half alone, I was talking to another agent earlier today about this. When I first started to see Asbury Avenue second floors listing for 999,000, again, about a year ago, maybe a year and a couple months, that seemed outrageous at the time. Now they are regularly selling and listing for above 1.1 million. So that's a 10% increase alone just in the past year when everything's been very, very tight. Things have been getting more expensive. West Avenue, one that I just put under contract, one that I am aware of that went under contract a few weeks ago, all very close to that $1 million mark, right? Between 950 and a million for West Avenue. Things have changed rapidly for those 3 bedrooms. That is still the traditional entry point. And most people need that 3rd bedroom at a minimum. Now, the 4 bedrooms, they're continuing to go up at an even higher rate because you have a lot of people that did start with the entry level 3 bedroom duplex unit, need the extra bedroom or prefer the extra bedroom. And then you also have people who I'll just say are more well off, who are able to afford that 4th bedroom from the jump. There's a lot of demand in there. And when you're looking at, a 25 to 30+% increase in price for that better location, typically because it's closer to the beach, depending on the lot size, Asbury Central have bigger lots. They have way more 4 bedrooms than 3 bedrooms. compared to West, you have the better location, you have the extra space. They're usually newer builds for the most part. So that subset of properties is selling at an increased rate for that price increase. And the 5 bedrooms are, a bit of an anomaly. They bounce all over. They're not very smooth just because it's a much lower volume of properties there. But all three, the 3, 4, and 5+ bedroom categories are going through the roof. Now, one last chart that I do want to show you here in case you think that things are crazy here. We have the yellow line, the nationwide average sale price. The orange, again, it's the same orange and blue from earlier, condo and single family. So I made the case again in that same video about 3 years ago in 2021 that while we were seeing kind of a meteoric rise, really from a percentage increase standpoint, we were just catching up compared to the nationwide prices. Nationwide, they didn't see the continued dip that we had in 2012 due to Hurricane Sandy. That held us back for years until people started feeling comfortable and safe purchasing here again. So now we have caught up and surpassed, and we see the single family trending along again with the nationwide prices. So condos here, why is it different, right? Why has that continued to rise? And I have a couple hypotheses here for you. So number one, given how much more affordable they are compared to what the single family prices have done, we have had more demand for the condo sector than we've ever had. So in my monthly market updates that you see here each and every month, those months of inventory charts, it stayed well below 6 months of inventory, whereas the single families had even jumped up to about 8 during all of this madness about a year and a half ago. We're still sitting between 4 and 5 months of inventory, and it's consistent. And that's despite the consistent increase in prices. So that's a very, very stable market that we have in the condo space. And yes, some people are still trading up from a 3 to a 4 bedroom. But primarily, these are first-time buyers to Ocean City. Whether it's an efficiency, whether it's a 4 bedroom, whatever the case, there's a ton of demand there. And once people accept, and a lot of people have had to be faced with this, once they accept that a single family is out of range, then you start seeing just how far that same budget can go in a condo, right? How much closer to the beach can you get? What amenities could you get that maybe you wouldn't have had in that single family in that price point? So the demand is just far superior in the condo market than we see in the single family. So I expect that to stay the same. I do expect the single families to bounce around where they are going forward. But the one thing that I do want to wrap up here with, and this is the big one, this is the big point, and I'm going to cherry pick a couple different scenarios here for you. So if we were to just look at a decade by decade approach, if you were to buy in 2000, or rather, if you were to sit there in 2000 and think, I'm going to wait, whether it's for rates to come down, whether it's for prices to drop, whatever the case is, from an Ocean City standpoint, you would have been so much worse off, right? If you were looking at a single family home, what would have cost you around 350,000, right, would be more than double, 780,000. Yes, there are peaks and valleys throughout there, right? But it's the same case for condos. Now, if we look again, 2010, right after the financial crisis, what about the next decade, right? If it was just too hard then, didn't quite make sense, didn't want to pull the trigger. What about that compared to 2020? 780,000 compared to 931,000. Again, substantial appreciation over time. Condos, 477 versus 631. Substantial. And obviously, the last few years speak for themselves. But if you lean more to the pessimistic side and you're nervous that now is the peak, right? And if I buy now, how long is that going to take me to get back whole? Let's look at the peak here in 05, right? If you bought in 05, $969,000, at what point would you have been able to resell, recoup your investment? And meanwhile, by the way, just have had 10 great years of memories here with your family. Let's leave that part aside, which is most of the reason why people buy here. The financial part is obviously a benefit, but you can't overlook that either. So for 10 years of memories, it would have taken you until just halfway through, we'll say 2020. So a good 15 years of holding. Condos, it's probably about the same from 638, 631 in 2020. So again, about 15 years. That's the worst case scenario that we have seen, at least during this 24-year period now. So what does this all mean? As a buyer, you have to think of this at this particular moment as a longer term play, right? Gone are the days, in my opinion, where the main goal is to just get your foot in the door, right? To plant your flag in Ocean City, knowing full well in 2, 3, 5 years, you'll be able to step up to the home you actually want, right? That's been the playbook here forever. Many agents have run that successfully. Many people, homeowners, families have done that and done extremely well for themselves. We're in a pretty unique situation that we haven't seen before with that gap in existing mortgage rates for a lot of the owners here versus what new buyers are faced with. So I think you really have to take a longer term view on this. And that initial purchase, you need it to work. I would say comfortably for at least 5 years, ideally 10. This should not be a short term decision. If it's a short term decision, is there a risk that prices could retread and come back down in the 5 to 10% range over the next couple of years? Anything is possible. I'm not going to say it's going to happen. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. Nobody knows. But if that is your main hurdle that you haven't been able to clear, let's just go back and talk through that again. So if you had bought in 2000, where would you be now? Even if you bought in 2005, where would you be now? Right? There are always going to be peaks and valleys, and trying to time it is a useless endeavor. We don't know what's going to happen. All we do know is we can look back over history well past 2000 and look at what home prices have done, whether it's a primary market, a secondary market, whatever the case is. It's a great investment to have. Now, for those of you, again, who are still here, maybe you're looking to rent. You may have heard, right, that you should only buy a property if it cash flows positive. Well, I have bad news. Unless you are putting a substantial sum of money down here in Ocean City, the market is so strong, and there are so many people who don't need to rent or don't want to rent and just want a second home that math doesn't work. You're not going to cash flow positive, again, unless you put a substantial sum of money down on almost every property. There are unique cases where it may be possible, but that should not be the expectation. If you set that expectation, you're going to be watching the market for the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, waiting for a cash flow positive 3-bed, 2-bath, 4-bed, 2-bath, whatever it is. And I don't think you're going to find it. And the challenge that I have for you, or the question I really want you to ask yourself is, why are you considering this to begin with? Right? If it's just about income, there are a million better ways to have positive cash flow than buying a beach house. Most people who have bought, who ended up buying here, have done so for two reasons. And I'm not going to say which one's 1A and 1B, it differs per person. But number one is memories with their family, being able to have their parents, their grandparents, their cousins, their sisters, whoever, be able to come down and have a place to gather and to enjoy America's greatest family resort, right? The memories that you build that you're going to instill in your kids, your grandkids, your family members, your friends are countless. Yes, there is a cost to doing that. Now, the other side of that coin, again, number two or 1B or 1A, is the income, is the appreciation. How many families here have built generational wealth simply by owning property here, right? Go back on that chart. If you bought at any point, how much better off would you be from a net worth standpoint now, despite the mortgage cost, despite the taxes that you pay, all of that? How much better off would you be now if you had bought then versus waiting and waiting and waiting? So the takeaway here is decisive people are the ones who come out on top here in this market. It is incumbent on you, and I'm here to support you every step of the way in getting educated up front to think through these hard questions. And it's not to push you one way or the other. You need to make a confident decision that you can live with. And I'm here to provide the insight, the knowledge, the education to help you make that decision, whether that's to buy, whether that's not to buy, right? Continue renting, whether that's to sell, whether that's to hold. Anything I can do to help. My contact info is down in the description. Do not hesitate to reach out. Again, you're never going to get a sale pitch from me. You're not going to get spam of any kind because I hate it probably more than you do. And I get calls from agents all the time who don't know I'm an agent. It drives me bonkers. That's it. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit the thumbs up below if you found this helpful. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe as well. That's going to make sure that you get notified of new videos and new content as I put it out each and every week about the market here in Ocean City. So that is it for today. Thank you as always for hanging out. I will see you next time.